Here we have Captain Jack Sparrow once again stranded on a lost island. Now, we know if he doesn't find food real quick, he's gonna die, right? Now, why, when we put a plant on a lost island, why does it survive? Why does it grow to become a healthy tree or a healthy plant? But as soon as we put a living thing on there, it's a high chance that it could die if there's no food on there. Say it's an empty island, no plants, no nothing. Why are humans so sensitive? So the reason is because plants can do something called photosynthesis to create their own energy. Photosynthesis literally means photo, that means light, and synthesis, which means to make. So using light, it can make its own food. Light synthesis, okay? We know humans don't work that way. To get our energy, we need to go eat something, a plant, an animal, whatever, candy, right? Because we have mouths. But a plant doesn't have that, so it needs to create its own energy. So a plant really depends on sunlight and some other things to create its own food. It doesn't need to eat anything else. Now, why is that? The reason is because plants are made up of plant cells and humans are made up of animal cells, or animals are made up of animal cells. And there is one very important distinction or difference between these cells that make us so different. So, a plant cell, which is what this leaf is made of, has a structure inside that is different from an animal cell. So, first of all, there are many common structures like the nucleus, mitochondria, rough ER, and those kind of things that are similar to a human animal cell. But it has a unique structure called the chloroplast. Okay, that's this little green one here. Animal cells do not have this. This little organelle is responsible for absorbing sunlight energy and using it to create food for the plant. Okay, and like I said, animals do not have that. We need to eat our food. The specific thing that absorbs the sunlight is called chlorophyll. Okay. Chlorophyll is a little molecule inside these organelles, inside the chloroplast, that absorbs the sunlight and uses it for energy. Now, it's very important, right, that plants can do this, because this means that despite us not being able to do it, we can survive because we can simply eat them and obtain our energy that way, okay? Or we can wait for a little animal like a monkey or something, maybe not a monkey, but a cow, to eat the plant, and then we eat the cow, right? Because the cow transferred the energy from the plant to the cow, and now we can eat the cow, okay? So, how exactly is light energy important? So first, before we know that, we need to know what light energy is and what it really means, because what does it really mean? It's kind of just light, you know? So, let me show you in this diagram. So here we have the sun, right? We know the sun gives us light, because when there's no sun at night, we can't see anything. It's dark. So when the sun comes out, it emits rays of light, waves of light, called white light, okay? Because it doesn't give us a particular color. It's not like when you look outside, you see green light or yellow light. You just see white light. They call it white light. Now, when we put this white light through a prism, so you put a prism just in your room and the sun shines through it, what will happen is this white light will get split apart into different colors, okay? All the colors of the rainbow. That's because this white light is made up of many wavelengths of color, okay? And when you combine all of these wavelengths together, it appears white to us, okay? But when you pass it through this prism, it will break apart into different wavelengths. So right here, you can see dark purple is short wavelengths. The waves are quick and short, whereas red is long wavelengths, okay? So when we see color, for example, let's say we see blue. The reason why we see blue is because our brain, when this wavelength comes into our eyes, it goes into our brains, and our brain understands this wavelength as a specific color. Okay, so that's how our brain understands color. Now, why do we see things in color? So for example, why is this leaf green? Let me show you. Like I said, in order to be able to see a color, that wavelength must pass into your eye. So the reason why we see this as green is because only green gets emitted from it. So for example, when all this white light is shined onto this leaf, it absorbs all of the wavelengths except green. So all of these wavelengths that get shined at it get absorbed into the leaf, but only green doesn't. And green gets reflected. And so when green gets reflected, it enters our eye and we see green. So that's why we see plants as green, because they absorbed everything, all the wavelengths except for green, okay? That's the same reason why some objects are black. An object is black when it absorbs all of the wavelengths and nothing is emitted. Okay, that's darkness. Okay, so that's important. So we know now that plants absorb everything but green light. Okay, so obviously the energy that it gets from sunlight is not due to the green wavelength. It's rather due to the other ones, such as red and blue. Okay, so it doesn't get energy from the green part of light. Okay, so, now you're like, okay, I kind of get this a little bit, but what's the purpose of this light in the first place? I understand that the sun gives off light and maybe it's made up of different wavelengths, okay, and this corresponds to different colors, but why do I want this wavelength? Why do I need it? You know, just like at the ocean, when you have waves there, right? Waves have energy. When this wave smashes you, you move, right? This wave had some energy in it. The same way that waves at the ocean have energy, these light waves also have energy, and so they can make things happen. Okay, so I'm going to show you just now exactly how. Let's go into the full process that you need to know being an SL student for photosynthesis. So here we go. So first of all, we're going to quickly zoom into the leaf, okay? Because we know it's made up of a cell, okay? A plant cell. And we know it's got chloroplast, the important organelle. Now this chloroplast, let's look into it. Let's zoom into this chloroplast and see how it really looks like. Okay, here it is, okay? This is the chloroplast, and I'll just show it here clearly. We zoom into it like this. Okay, we're zoomed into the chloroplast now. When we open up the chloroplast, okay, what do we see inside? We see these little disc-like structures, okay? And they're everywhere. I didn't put them everywhere in this diagram because I'm going to demonstrate some stuff here, but bear in mind that they're everywhere. And these disc-like structures are called thylakoids. You don't need to know this as an SL student, but as an HL student you do. Anyways, these thylakoids are, I'm going to zoom into these thylakoids now. So here we have the thylakoid, okay? We're zooming into that now. So there's a lot of zooming in going on here. Okay, we're zooming into that thylakoid. Okay. Now, so like I said, we have the light energy, okay, coming from the sun. And it goes into the cell, plant cell, and it goes to these chloroplasts. All of the waves are absorbed except for green. Green gets reflected, okay? But all the other waves are absorbed into this little structure called the thylakoid. Now, as it goes into the thylakoid, what happens is it is going to break something, because I said, remember, waves in the oceans can break you, it can move you, okay? It can break things. It has power. The same way waves at the ocean can break things, these waves can as well. So the light energy gets absorbed into here, so we're zooming into here, and it's going to break water molecules apart. So this is where water comes in. So there is water inside these thylakoids, okay? Water is H2O, so 2 hydrogens and 1 oxygen. These hydrogens carry an electron, okay? So I'm going to put a hat on them, okay? And this E negative is just an electron. So just know these hydrogens carry electrons, okay? Don't worry too much about the real science behind it. You don't need to worry about it too much for biology. So when this light comes, okay, this energy, these waves, they come and smash this molecule apart. And then this turns this water molecule into, guess what? Oxygen. Because right now they're all bonded to each other. The hydrogen is bonded to the oxygen here, and this oxygen is bonded to that hydrogen there, and they're all holding on to electrons. But when this energy comes, this light energy, it breaks apart this water molecule into oxygen, hydrogen, and hydrogen. Okay? And these hydrogens are gonna then, these hydrogens with their electrons, will then be broken apart into simply protons. Let me show you clearly. Now, and the light will keep hitting it, and then the light will cause these hydrogens to be separated from their electrons. So now we have what we call protons. A hydrogen without an electron is called a proton. So we got a hydrogen without its electron, that's called a proton. And we still have our oxygen, and we have our electron that is by itself now. Okay, it is separated into it by itself. In this process of breaking water into oxygen, hydrogen, and electron is called photolysis, because we used photo, which is light, to split. Lysis means to split apart. So using light to split apart water into these things. Now, in this process, by the way, we created energy. Okay? Energy in the form of ATP. Maybe you know what ATP is. ATP is like energy for a cell. Okay? So we created ATP as well, this little lightning bolt. So this photolysis created oxygen, oxygen, protons, electrons, and ATP. Oxygen is what we breathe, right? So this is where oxygen is made. Oxygen can now be used by Captain Jack Sparrow so that he can survive and keep breathing. That's why plants are so important, because photolysis causes the production of oxygen, which can go into the environment, so it can leave the cell and go into the air that we breathe. Okay? That's it. That's very important. So by the way, this right here is called the light dependent reaction of photosynthesis. Photosynthesis is split into light dependent and light independent. This one is called light dependent because it depends, it needs light to happen. Okay, so this happens during daylight. So now inside these thylakoids, we are accumulating a lot of oxygen, hydrogen, electrons, and ATP. Now what will happen is they will move out of this thylakoids and go into the what's called the stroma, but you don't need to know this name either for SL. So just know that they leave into the space outside of this disk. Okay, so they accumulate there. All the hydrogens, obviously there should be 2 hydrogens here, because 2 hydrogens lost their electrons, should be 2 electrons, but it will take too much space, so just know what I mean. Okay, so now it accumulates in here. Now, during the day, this can't do anything for us, so it's just building up, okay? It's just building up. It doesn't have a purpose yet. But at night, so let's say nighttime comes now. At night, it's still bright outside, but it's night, okay? Just bear that in mind. So at night, what happens is we enter a phase called the light independent reaction. The light independent reaction, because this part can only happen without light, so it doesn't need light. It doesn't need light. So let's say it's darkness. So we're going to put darkness here. This is a shadow. It's dark. Okay? So now that it's dark, something can happen. All of these molecules here, all of these little things made during the light-dependent reaction can now do something called carbon fixation. Carbon fixation. So here's the word, carbon fixation. Because we're going to fix all of these things, all these pieces, and put them into something called glucose. Here's glucose. Okay? Glucose. Maybe you've learned this structure in another chapter, but all of these combined, so using the energy and oxygen and hydrogen and electron, we can make this. But now you might ask me, well, I'm looking at glucose and I see there's carbon. So where did the carbon come from? Because here, there's only oxygen, hydrogen, electrons, and energy. So where did carbon come from? Carbon came from the air we exhale. So remember, he uses oxygen, which was made, but he also exhales carbon dioxide. So when carbon dioxide is taken up by this plant cell and is taken into the chloroplast, here it will combine with hydrogen, oxygen, energy, and electrons to form this structure, because hydrogen is from here, oxygen is from here. Oxygen can be used for us to breathe and to help make glucose. And so yeah, you see, this is called carbon fixation because we're making a nice carbon organic molecule, okay, from inorganic things. All of these are inorganic things, okay? Inorganic. Inorganic is anything, any molecule that doesn't have a carbon, a hydrogen, and an oxygen in it. Because these only have, this, for example, water only has hydrogen and oxygen. It doesn't have carbon, so it's called inorganic. And oxygen is just oxygen, so it's inorganic, inorganic, inorganic. But this one has all three of them, so we can call it organic. So basically, a lot of glucose will then accumulate in here, okay? And glucose can be used by him. For example, if he's real hungry and he's desperate, he's going to eat a leaf, okay? You got to eat something. And he will then, by eating this leaf, get in some glucose from the cells. And this glucose can be used by him and break it down by cellular respiration to make energy. So he can break it down to make energy through a different way. Now, this glucose is called chemical energy, okay? Because we now managed to turn light energy from the sun, right? Converted it into a bunch of chemicals and eventually glucose, which is a chemical. So we turned this light energy into chemical energy. So this chemical energy can be used by heterotrophs, anything that eats plants or other animals. And yeah, so that's basically this. That's basically it. So it's a real interesting, quite unique process. But now I quickly want to show you the equation that I mentioned that I said I don't want to mention yet. So let's go to it. Oh yeah. So by the way, here is a nice little graph that shows wavelength. So wavelengths, different wavelengths have different color, right? So as I said, red has the longest wavelength and blue has the shortest wavelength. Now this graph shows you, depending on the wavelength that the plant absorbs, the photosynthesis will be different. So you can see the highest photosynthesis happens when the wavelength is red or blue. When it's green, it's the worst. That's because we know it doesn't absorb green light. Green light is reflected, so green light doesn't help a plant do photosynthesis. It doesn't help this, right? It doesn't help split all these molecules apart because it's not absorbed. So just know that basically blue and red light is the most useful, and then everything in between is kind of reflected, so it's not useful for photosynthesis. Lastly, we get to the equation. Here is the equation of photosynthesis. We use carbon dioxide, where? When he exhales carbon dioxide, and we know it is useful where? It is useful here in this part where carbon dioxide is combined with all of these molecules from the light-dependent reaction to make glucose, right? That's where it's from. Water is from where? Water is from here. Water, remember, water is split apart, so water is required for the light-dependent reaction. So carbon dioxide, water, will form what? Oxygen, because oxygen is now released after it's split, so now we can breathe the air of oxygen. And then this right here is the chemical structure for glucose. At the end of all this, glucose was formed, right? After carbon fixation in the light-independent reaction. So that was it for photosynthesis, all that you need to know if you're an SL student. And I hope this diagrams helped you remember it a bit easier.